This is Anna's log. It's Friday, the 11th of March, 2016. I asked the question, who's the wise guy? I'm thinking of activists, and there's a few that stand out to me. And the people, my definition of an activist is someone that tries to bring a change to their community that they feel is unfair. Like a lifestyle that's been imposed by the government that people don't want. And there's two people that stand out in my mind, and that's Martin Luther King and the unnamed Chinese protester that stood in front of the tanks in China, I think it's Tiananmen Square. And the Martin Luther King, he was the leader of the civil rights movement in America. He was like an activist against white supremacy and mistreatment of the black people and unfair rights towards his own community, the black community. And one thing that stood out about him was that he got results without using violence. So what he would do, he would promote civil disobedience, ethical civil disobedience that would not involve any violence at all. And the government wouldn't know how to respond to this because they're used to dealing with people throwing bricks and attacking things and burning things, and they'll just throw them in prison. They'll deal with them. It's like that. They didn't know how to deal with Martin Luther King, because what he would do is he would force them to financially. So what he would do, let me take you back there to the time, his time, generation. What would happen was, like, a black guy would come onto a bus and they'd have a rule where the black guy has to sit at the back of the bus and the white guy can sit at the front where he can get off. It's all padded and it's comfy and he can get off at the door. And the black guy has to sit at the back of the bus. And you couldn't sit, if he sat at the front, he had to get off the bus. And he wasn't allowed to vote as well, I think, at the time. And they weren't allowed to use the same toilets, the public toilets. And there's shops that only white people could go into. There was restaurants that only white people can go into. And they were treated like second-class citizens. So what Martin Luther King did was he promoted the peaceful protests, and one day, I believe, he actually told his followers to actually boycott the buses and the public transport. So by boycotting, he actually got the results, because what would happen is they boycotted taking the bus. So what they'd do is they'd get up like 1 hour early and leave for work 1 hour early, or school, and walk or take a bike, and they wouldn't use the bus. They'd say, I'm going to get on that bus if I'm treated fairly. If I'm not treated fairly, I'm not getting on that bus. And then loads of black people, you'd see them walking and they wouldn't be getting on the bus. And within a few weeks, the bus companies were suffering. They were hemorrhaging money because they weren't getting fees from they were only getting fees from white passengers. And even some of the white passengers, some of them stopped and joined them, I believe. So what was happening was the bus company was forced to make a decision, either to change their policy, of their unfair policy, or go bankrupt. And what they did is they changed the policy so black people could sit wherever they wanted on the bus, and the government wouldn't back that up. They wouldn't stop them, because otherwise they'd go bankrupt. And I think that's a quite smart move they did, because the government of America, the American government didn't know what to do. They couldn't arrest them. You can't arrest someone for not going on a bus, and you can't arrest someone for not going into a shop or refusing to spend money because in the whole high street, because there's shops they can't go into. So what was happening is they're using boycotting to take action, and the Chinese guy, he did a similar sort of thing, but in a different way. He stood in front of some tanks, and because he was fed up of not having any freedom of speech, and he was fed up with not knowing what the government are doing, and they're not they're rigging the elections, I believe, or I don't know what all the details were, but he wasn't happy with the way the government was in China at the time. And what he did is he just said, look, he just stood in front of the tanks, and the guy that's controlling the tank, obviously he's just another guy like him. He said, I'm not going to run this guy over. They stopped the tank, and the whole fleet behind that tank, the whole column of tanks stopped. And then you see the posters going around, because the guy wasn't. They didn't know what to do with the guy because he wasn't attacking them. He was just standing there. No one wants to run a guy over. He's just very peaceful. He's just standing there. He's not throwing anything at them, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't have an answer. They couldn't attack him because he's not attacking them. He's just standing there. And they just stopped, and it drew attention to the problem. And you see the posters everywhere. You see the guys just standing in front of tanks in China, and it creates awareness as well. But I guess if I was to pick a winner of those two, it has to be Martin Luther King, obviously, because his boycotting and his civil disobedience, his ethical civil disobedience and peaceful protesting brought loads of results. And it sort of highlights another situation, like, with Cadbury's chocolates. They were taken over recently by Kraft. And I noticed that people get angry, they shout and they make loads of noises, and they go on forums and they write things, and they say that they're not happy about the recipe changes. They change the recipe of the chocolates, and they're not happy about they're not happy that some of the products have been removed or pulled, or they're not happy about that, or they're not happy that they're changing the packaging, or that. That's because the original Cadbury's is completely different to the way it is now. Maybe they can taste it. I don't know, because I'm not into chocolate like people. I rarely take chocolate myself. So what happens is, I don't know what would get better results, if a load of people just start shouting on forums and protesting, or if people just boycott and just don't buy the chocolate. If you don't like it, everyone just stop buying it, and then they'll be forced to put the ingredients back in the way they were, and then put the products back they'd pulled off. That's what I would do. And I've done a few things like that myself, believe it or not. I boycotted Starbucks when I found out they weren't paying corporate tax. When they're pretending not to make profit. They'll set themselves up so they're buying from themselves from another part of their company that was based in a tax haven country, and their own profits would be low, and then it would look like they're not making profit to the inland revenue, whereas they're actually making loads of profit, because the money goes there and then it goes back again to wherever the company's based in America. And that's when I found out they're doing that, I actually stopped going to Starbucks. And by stopping going to Starbucks, if enough people did that, then people will get the message. If people are not happy about something, I think the most effective way to bring change is to boycott something. If you boycott something, then they're forced to change. Otherwise, they'll lose benefit from it. And it's the same with the only thing boycott wouldn't work in is voting, because rich people always vote. Well, anyway, I mean, that's all I have to say today. But so until next time, goodbye.